So we're getting close. Not a lot left to do. Stick around for the rest of this episode and you'll see how we got this far. The ramps are now completed. And they worked out just as planned. All right, everyone, let me kind of catch you up on where we're at here. I cut a few pieces of the ramp material off camera. Again, you see me cut one piece of metal. You don't need to see me cut them all and bore yourselves. So I'm going to pan down here in a second to kind of show you what I cut and how I'm going to do the layout. The CAD drawing works great for the majority of it, but when it gets down to some of these very last details, short of having a very expensive welding table with some fixtures on it where you can really dial things in right to the gnats, you know what. When it gets to the final fitting like it is on these ramps, many times it's just easier to put the pieces in place where they're normally going to rest and just tack weld things in place and then pull them off and weld the whole thing out. So that's what how I'm gonna do this method. So I'll pan you down here. I've got the two 3-inch channel pieces. I've got those cut. I've got the taper cut. And I determined where that taper was going to be. You can see the level here in the background. I just extended that level like this out across what the deck would be, and that sets the angle for those channels. So that's how I determined that angle, and just cut those out with a torch and touch them up with a grinder. So this piece is clamped in place where it will rest when the ramps are folded. And then what I've got down here on the hinge end is I cut the upright tubes. These tubes here, I cut them long. And so once I have them either clamped in place, I can make a mark and then cut them, or I may even just tack them in place and then come back and cut them after the fact. But at any rate, these run a little bit long right now. And I've got some shims. Let me grab my tape measure again as a pointer. So I've got a shim up here and a shim right here underneath the channel, and those shims are the equivalent thickness of 2 pieces of the expanded metal. Because since there's expanded metal on the beaver tail or the dovetail, and there'll be expanded metal on the ramps, when they fold all down, that's how much they'll be spaced up. If I were to put them down tight and then lay out the hinge location, when you went to fold them down, they bind and they wouldn't close all the way down. So right now I've just got those shims put under there to simulate the combined thickness of the expanded metal. And those shims run a little long down here, and then I've got one over there. You probably can't make it out very well. So that will also hold this piece up in place. So that's going to be the drop leg piece, and I'll move in here a little closer. That houses that other half round or quarter round, piece that we made way back in earlier episodes. So that combined creates a half round, and then so once I have these clamped in the exact location, I'll just make a template, again a little ear, add a cardboard template, transfer the center to it, and then make 6 of those ears. And before I weld those ears completely down, I will actually assemble the ears with the pins. So the ears will be hanging free, this will be free, and then I'll just tuck everything right into the final position that it lands, and then tack weld the ears into this quarter round. So anyway, that's kind of where we're at this point on the hinges. I'll probably leave the camera running because this part of the layout might be a little bit interesting to you. So I'm going to get this one kind of mocked up in place, and then I'll switch it to the other side, which will allow me to position the other 3-inch longitudinal piece, and then we'll get to hopefully get pretty close to having these done in this episode. So stand by and watch. So I decided it'll be easier to do the layout and cut these drop legs to length now. So versus trying to hold the whole affair up in the saw. So what I'm doing here is just like I mentioned, I've got my longest level on there. It's down a ways on the trailer, so that projects the level line of the trailer out to this point. It's not setting, it's not touching here. You probably can't tell. Let me shorten it up here. It's actually not touching here. There's some gap, and that's also a determined or a shimmed gap that will account for the diamond plate that will be on the opposite side of the ramps. So when they're folded up, it'll have a, as we mentioned, a wood deck, but then the ramps will have a diamond plate surface on them. So that's the thickness of the diamond plate. So that's why there's a little bit of a gap there. So then now it allows me to put this up here, and then just with a Sharpie, transfer the point of where that touches, and that'll give me the cut point. Okay, so I've got those kind of mocked up and tacked together just to make sure everything goes geometry-wise goes smooth before I weld them in solid. I'll tip you down here a little bit so you can see this one's sitting in place where it'll go. The other couple pieces that'll go on is this top bar will go on for the drop leg, and that way when and if it does come down and touch the ground, it won't just push these tubes into the ground. Then there's also this 1/4 inch by 2 flat bar. There's several of these. I think there's 4 per ramp, if I remember right. Those drop down in between the channels on edge to support the weight and support the expanded metal. So I'll probably put one of those in just to kind of lock this in together so it doesn't wiggle around, because right now it's this 1/4 round is the only thing in essence that's keeping the two sides from doing this type of action. So I'll tack one of those in place, and then I'll probably make possibly 2 ears just out of some thinner material because they're quicker to make. I'll probably make 2 ears, and then I can use those as the template. And so just tack a couple ears on there, slip the rod in there, and just make sure that everything cycles freely and there's nothing that interferes and hits before I weld them all together, because if you weld them all together and there's something not quite right, then that's obviously a whole lot more work to undo than to just cut a few tack welds loose. So I'm gonna go, I got a couple other errands to do, so I'm gonna do that, and I may come back out later this afternoon or this evening and tack those pieces in, so stay tuned. Alright, so I scribed that out on a piece of cardboard, and basically that's the template for, so again, I'll probably make a couple of them out of some thinner material, so I can just file the hole a little bit. Actually, I'll probably leave it at 1 inch initially, and make sure it works, and then I'll make the 6 ears and bore them out like I did on the ears for the trailer. So I'll probably pause it here for that. and then I'll bring you back once I've got the ears tacked in place, and we'll swing the ramps through their arc and see if they work the way they're supposed to. Alrighty, I finished up making the ears as I indicated. I made those out of 3/8 thick material, just like the ears that were on the hinge ears were on the beaver tail itself. So I'm going to give you a close-up of those. So those ears just here are on the trailer, same principle as on the trailer itself. I bored, just like on the other ones, I bored the holes oversized to leave a little bit of flexibility. If you wanted to know how that was done and didn't see it in that episode, you can go back to, I think it was like in episode 4 or 5, where I used the boring head and the drill press to bore those. So I laid them out here, tacked them all in place. As I mentioned, when I tried it with the temporary ear, I had to clearance that ear a little bit, so these ears have the clearance in them, so that provides sufficient room for them to come all the way around and touch the ground. Basically making that that angle as gradual as you're going to get it without making much longer ramps. The one advantage of having them on a round bar like that is they're 30 inches wide, so even in this position there's not much you couldn't put on the trailer without having to adjust them, but if need be, they just slide on that round bar, so you can scoot them together. This one doesn't go quite as easy. So then they're basically together, so you could, if you had something with a narrower wheel track, etc. So those ramps are, for the most part, complete. I am going to put diamond plate on the back side of them. And then these two tubes go on here. That gives it the correct height. And that's the flat portion of the deck. Minus the, so if I scoot this one out here, I'll give you the how it's going to work out. Put that tube on there. And if I take my long level, you can see how that finishes out that angle minus, let me put some weight on the level so it stays flat on the trailer. So that gets it within about 1/4 of an inch, which will allow for the diamond plate. So that lets you see how when that part is done, it'll in essence extend the deck. Same plane on the deck, and each ramp is 30 inches wide, so that'll give you a full 20 feet of deck. And if you scoot them together, then that'll be 60 inches worth of width here at the back, which is more than enough if you, let's say, had to haul some long pieces of lumber or whatever you may have. So I'm going to go ahead, since they worked out okay, I've got some additional cross members, 2 more cross members to put in here. Those are on every 6 inches on center to allow for support of whatever you might drive up the ramps. So I'm going to get those tacked in and then pretty much weld the ramps out. The diamond plate, I don't have it on hand. I've got to probably go tomorrow to the steel supplier because I've got to get a couple other pieces, and I'll pick up some diamond plate so I can finish those out. And then really all that we've got left is the mounts for the fenders. I have to put the safety chains or a weld on safety chain clamp affair, and the taillight housings here at the back. And then I haven't decided. I drew up a spare tire mount, which would put the spare tire kind of right behind, right in this area here, behind the fender on one side. But I'm not 100% sure I'm going to do that because then it's kind of there in the way, I guess, if I ever needed to come in from the side. So I'm debating. I may do the spare tire mount and make it removable using one of the winch mounts sockets up front. So that way, if you were going to use the winch, you could just lay the spare tire in the bed of the pickup or on the trailer and take it with you. But if not, then the spare tire would be stored on the trailer. So I haven't decided yet for sure what I'm going to do with the spare tire mount. So I'm going to get going on all that final welding on the ramps, and then we'll bring you back when we've got some more stuff to talk about. Good morning, everyone. I just got back from town. I had to run into my steel supplier and get the last few things I needed, including picking up some diamond plates. So I'm just going to cut out the pieces for the ramps, and I'll do that with a plasma cutter because it makes it a little bit cleaner cut. So you can watch a little bit of that. So that was real time, as you can see, quite a bit quicker than the torch. This is 1/8 inch diamond plate or tread plate, but that's at the not at the peaks of the diamond. So it's actually about parts of it are 3/16 of an inch thick when you go across the top of a diamond, and 1/8 inch. And so I can make pretty good time with just that little 50 amp plasma cutter. So next up, now that the ramps are done, is going to be the tail lights. So obviously they go at the rear of the trailer, and they're a square style light, LED. So I'm going to put them back here. They need to be back as far as I can, but this gets fairly narrow here. So I don't want them to take the brunt if I did scrape the trailer. So I'll keep the bottom of the light, or at least the bracket that protects it, right even with that. And it'll probably come up above this portion, but it doesn't really matter because you won't be driving over there. So I'm going to build basically a top and a bottom shield. I have to leave the end of it open for the clearance light, and then there'll be a couple bars on the back that it bolts into. So I'm going to cut those pieces out. The bottom one's pretty easy because it'll just go in right at this parallel line, or the line that's parallel with the ground. And then the top will actually, because this tapers, the top will come over and then the edge will be bent over, forming a little pie piece to finish it off. Once I get the piece made, I'll bring you back and kind of show you what it looks like, and you'll understand a little bit more about how it's going to work. So what I'm doing here, I'll show you a little bit of the detail on the light brackets. I just cut a continuous piece of 3 by 1/8 flat stock out, and then measured up the dimensions of the tail light, and then use the skinny wheel to groove that about halfway through. That way when you bend it, you can actually bend it cold pretty easily, but it sometimes will crack, so I will heat it up a little bit. But it gives you, that way it gives you a really nice sharp corner. And then I'll just touch up weld beads in those grooves. So basically it's this piece of cardboard simulates that piece of flat stock, and I just took a razor blade and cut halfway through to simulate the skinny wheel. And so then when you fold this up or bend this up, it ends up with this kind of a shape here, which the housing will go in, and this end here has got, as you can see, has got a taper on it, so that matches the taper of the beaver tail. So that just sits in there on the side of the trailer like that, and gives a little box for the light to sit in that protects it. And on the back of the box, I'll put 2 more straps to mount the light tube. So anyway, I've got got the first couple bins made. I'll show you the last couple bins here. See there's just this, like I said, I cut part way through with the skinny wheel. Once they're hot, I just use instead of going over the vise, the stake pocket is just about the right size. So stick it in the stake pocket and use that as a bending plunge. I just eyeball them for square and to get them the majority of the way there, and then if they're not quite square, I can bend them a little bit farther or bend them back a little bit cold. So that's how they're in about, I only had the video paused for maybe 10 minutes, maybe 15 minutes at the most, so it didn't take long to cut those out. It took longer to cut them, rip them down to width, because I didn't have any 3-inch wide, which is what that is. All I had was some 4-inch wide, so I made them out of 4-inch and then took the plasma cutter and basically ripped off 1-inch strips. So that took longer to do that than it did to describe them and bend them up. So I'm gonna go turn the torch off and I'll show you how they fit. All right, check the square real quick. I don't get much closer than that just by eyeing it. See if I can hold it up here to where. Little tiny bit off. But for the tail light, it'll work just fine. I don't have to worry about tweaking them at all. So then the tail light just fits inside of that box, so it's protected. like I said, because there is an end clearance light, I'll cut a window in this and dress that up. I'll do that before I weld it on. So I'll bring you back again once I've got the window cut and the mounting brackets put on there. Okay, we last finished off with laying out and bending the tail light housings. So I'm going to tack weld on the brackets on the back side of the housing that the light bolts to, and then get those tacked onto the frame, and that'll probably about do it for this episode. We'll see how much time there is, but I've been thinking about, I'm also going to add a handle onto the ramps. They're not that heavy and you can grab on the channel, but I think I'm going to put a piece of cold rolled round bar out there that gives you a handle both when you're lifting it from the trailer to the ground and then from the ground to the trailer. So might do that also. So let's get going. Okay, so I'm going to go clean these up on the belt grinder, and then I'll show you how they turned out. Alright, so that finishes those up. You just got the mounting brackets on the back side, that way the light just tucks in there, it's protected, and it gives you this is the left-hand headlight, or tail light. And then it gives you that window I cut, and it gives you the window for the side clearance marker. So those will just go on here like that. Again with that taper, so I can get it as far back as I can. Okay, so that gets those tacked in place. I think I'm going to do a little bit of cleanup here, pull the trailer out of the shop so that I can sweep up some, and then I'll give you a quick walk around outside because it's nice and sunny today. Okay, everyone, let's take I pulled it out of the trailer out of the shop, so let's take a quick look and then kind of a recap of what's left. So I'll finish this episode up with this walk around, and then really all that's left is just a few punch list items. As I mentioned, the handles on the tongue. I'll flip you around here, or the ramps. So I'm going to put the handles down here in this area so that they'll flip over easy, and then you could also pick them back up easy. I've got that to do. I'm going to put a license plate bracket on it on the back. I have the fender mounts to do, though I've got them clamped on there temporarily. Up front, about all that's left is attached to safety chains. They came with this style of a weld-on eye that the chain loops under, and then you weld it on. The one downfall with that is if you would ever damage a chain or something, you have to cut it off and then use either a clevis or a cold shed or weld it off, or cut it off and weld it back on, which messes up the paint. So I ordered a different style that I will show you in the next episode that allows you to actually change the chains out if needed. The tongue is on, or the tongue jack's on, as you can see. So we are getting very close. I'm hoping that just one more episode of the punch list items, and the weather's been getting really nice here in the Northwest. So I'm hoping then that we will get going on the paint job on this. Again, in the comments, you could throw out the ideas of what color you think I might plan on painting it. So I think that'll wrap it up. This is a good time to remind you guys, if you wouldn't mind, to subscribe, like, ring the bell, and make any comments that you'd like to. So I will see you in the next episode.